Thank you for listening to The Freddie O Show, a podcast devoted to you, the listener, your purpose, your mindset, and your marketing efforts, designed to help you go to that next level. Now, here's your host, Freddie O.
I am super excited to bring Jennifer Anastasi on board today. Jennifer, welcome to The Freddie O Show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So to start off, Jennifer, can you tell us a little about yourself, your hobbies, passion? Who is Jennifer Anastasi?
That is a fantastic question. And, sometimes I really wish I knew. So I call myself a recovering engineer. I went into engineering. I worked software engineering and software development for about 9 years. I worked a bunch of different things. And then I ended up having a kid. And once I had a kid, I was like, you know what? I want to do something different with my life. It's amazing how that kind of puts things in perspective for you. So I decided to open up my own business. It was lovely. I sort of jumped in without any idea what I was doing. And for the last almost 2 years, I've been sort of figuring it out and really learned how to take all that fun stuff that I was doing with engineering and with my background and really focus it on small businesses and helping other people get a really great brand strategy put in place using those engineering skills.
Excellent. So when you say engineering skills, you mean just like honing in with a different, real quick, you talk about you're a big proponent of doing research before jumping into marketing and not winging it. Can you dig a little deeper into that? Does that have something to do with what you talked about, like with engineering?
Absolutely.
The engineering side of it?
So the spark notes for an engineering degree is that, a lot of times people want to jump in and, I worked with computer code. So you just want to start getting in there and coding. And we were very much trained that you don't do that. You start by planning everything out, that you do all of your research. And essentially, there's 1,000,001 ways to get from point A to point B. And there's so many different ways you can do it. But some ways are going to be a little bit more efficient. Some ways are going to work better in the long term. Some are going to use different technologies. And so you really have to take the time to plan everything out to make sure that you're going to accomplish your goals for that particular piece of software. So that's very much how I approach doing brand strategy. You're not just winging it before you sit down to commit anything, to paper. You are doing your research and you're figuring out what other ways are out there. What are the different ways we can get from point A to point B, and then figuring out which way is the best for that particular client or brand.
So there's different strategies for different businesses.
Absolutely. And there's different strategies for all sorts of marketing. I mean, you can go on YouTube and type in, how do I market my small business? And you'll get over 1 million hits. So there's always so many different ways, and they're not wrong. One's not better than the other. It's just for different businesses, different things work.
Absolutely. So with that being said, branding in general, what do you see the biggest mistake people do when it comes to branding? What are they focusing too much on and not putting their focus on the right things? Give me an example.
Great question. So I see people not focusing on branding at all, or looking at branding as a color palette and a logo. And branding is so much more than that. So ultimately, branding is how people feel about your business when they interact with it. And every time they even go to your website, that's an interaction. And so what a lot of people will do is they don't think about their branding. They just jump into marketing their business, and they'll say, okay, I see that this type of post is working on social media, so I'm going to do a similar type of post. And they go out and they do that. And then they see something else. And they're like, okay, well, I see this person, the YouTube video works, and I really like how that background looks. So I'm going to do something similar. And they don't take the time to think, what type of message does this send? If I put out, for example, a marketing post where I talk about on social media how honesty is very important to me and how I'm all about being authentic, and that's a buzzword right now. And then and so I see this post from somebody on social media, and then I go to their website and they've got really photoshopped images kind of all over the place, and I can tell they're photoshopped. That creates an inconsistency and it sort of breaks trust. But to me, as a brand strategist, I very much see that as a lack of deliberate brand strategy. You don't have, okay, these decisions that I'm making in terms of my marketing, I'm not doing it from the point of view of how is somebody going to think or feel when they see one thing over here and something else there. So a lot of people just, make an understandable mistake of not realizing how important that is.
Okay. So, with a lot of marketers, they think that when they try something, they have to if it doesn't work, they have to overhaul their marketing efforts completely. What would you they have to start from scratch and rebuild it. And which, first of all, I don't believe you have to do that at all. Small tweaks to higher peaks, in my opinion. Exactly. So if you had somebody that had a completely and totally whacked out brand, how would you approach that with them?
Well, I think you start by saying, what about this brand feels so whacked out? So I always start from the point of view that you have to have a solid foundation, right? You're not going to build a house on a straw foundation, right? You want that concrete foundation and build everything else on top of it. So, it's going to be able to take the hit, because every brand has to be prepared to take a hit at some point or another in the world that we live in.
Yep.
So I like to start by saying, okay, we don't need to burn everything to the ground. Sometimes the tactics are really good tactics, but it's the messaging behind it. So let's take a look at what the messaging really should be. And a lot of times, especially for a small business or medium-sized business where there is an entrepreneur at the center of it, we can go back to that entrepreneur and we can say, okay, what are things that you value? What are things that you see, for the future of your company? Because at the end of the day, we all like to say, well, I'm in business because I want to make money, right? And I think that's something a lot of people say. But the truth of the matter is, I'm an engineer. I could go out and I could be making a lot of money working a 40-hour work week as an engineer. However, I choose to be an entrepreneur because I believe that this is a better path for me. And so it's not really about the money, it's about something else. And so what is that something else? And most of the people that I talk to, with a little bit of digging, were able to figure that out. And usually it's just a slight misalignment. And we're able to say, okay, well, we've got sort of this foundation now set, this purpose of your business. We've got your values kind of figured out. Can we sort of just tweak everything to align with that and make sure that all of your marketing just lines up with this? It just fits. And it's amazing what happens.
When you say solid foundation and not straw foundation, can you dig a little deeper into that as far as a solid foundation?
Absolutely. So as a business, you need to know why you're in business, and you need to know why somebody should work with you over working with somebody else. And we all know this kind of on a conceptual level, but a lot of people don't always take the time to dig into that. They just kind of say, well, I'll figure that out later. Let me just start marketing so I can try to make some money. And often that's where I see people really spinning their wheels, because if you ask them, well, why do you do what you do? They can't give you a really solid answer. Or, what values do you want your company to have? And they're like, I don't really know. Or the answer changes too. One day they'll say, well, I'm all about authenticity. And then the next day they'll say, oh, I'm all about being unique, or things like that. And without having that really solid, idea of why you're in business and what your business stands for and what those values are, and then also what makes you stand out, what makes you different, it's going to be very, very hard to market yourself, because these are things that people ultimately look for. And it's something that's becoming even more important because of the way that the younger generations are purchasing these days. So if you look at, the research that's coming out, millennials and people in Gen Z, they buy very much based on what a company stands for and what their values are. And so, without that foundation, it's going to be very hard to market to those people.
Now you have on your site, people no longer want to deal with businesses. They want to deal with other people.
Yep.
So, and I love that, because that's one of the reasons why I got into the industry, is because I went in wanting to help people realize their purpose and their passion. I ended up drifting over to, and I still want to do that, but drifting over to, I love creating funnels, creating websites. I love optimizing funnels, so on and so forth. But that is still my purpose within going into business, is to help other people. So I can help people optimize their funnels, and I like to have fun with it. Now, a solid foundation to build your messaging on, consistency across your copy, graphics, and every single touch point. Are you referring to the font? I know you talked about not having color wise, but can you go a little deeper into that aspect of it?
Sure. So your messaging is more than just your copy. And I tend to find that people will either say, oh, I'm going to focus on visuals, or I'm going to focus on copy. But all of that goes together, right? It's like that saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And so in brand strategy, we like to talk a lot about framing. So you can say things like long trunk, stubby legs, gray color, afraid of mice. And at this point, hopefully you're thinking about an elephant, but I never actually said that word to kind of get you to think about that. And so all of these different things come together and they frame out this idea that you're trying to project. And so with your brand, you've got your copy, your messages. You also have things like your color. They absolutely fit into a brand. It's just not the entire brand. And there's color psychology. If your graphics look a certain way, all of this fits in together to send signals to the people who are sort of checking you out. They're trying to size you up. Should I work with this person? Should I, go on and look for somebody else? So we want to use all of these things, and we want them all to pull in the same direction. So we want things like your colors to give off a certain vibe. It's like the reason why banks are all greens and blues and they're not oranges. Some banks are oranges because they want to be different. But it's all color psychology. And so we want that to pull in the same direction as the messages that we're putting on our website or in our social media. We want, our graphics to all kind of pull in that same direction. So we don't want to have, maybe a random stock photo that has a totally different vibe than every other photo we've ever put out there. We just want it all to work together. And, there's a lot of different touch points out there. There's different media points. There's different marketing messages. There's coming to your website. There's things like filling out requests to meet with you. If you've got like a calendar app, all of these things are different touch points. And we want to make sure that they're all pulling in that same direction and really cement that idea of who you are as a business in that person's mind.
Yeah, it's crazy, because I was just talking about, my friend he's not a branding strategist, but I was actually speaking of rebranding certain aspects of my business. And because here's the thing, I know that one of the biggest things I struggle with is, and I outsource a lot of stuff, but you can't outsource everything unless you find the exact right person to do it. And that is for instance, graphics. I was outsourcing graphics, and then I go to my Instagram, and I had to delete numerous graphics because it was completely not what I felt I wanted to see. And it was completely different than what I was putting out there on my own. So you talk about having tools. I know you have your free Facebook group as well. It's strategic marketing from winging it to unforgettable messaging. That, guys, you want to check out the show notes to get into this free Facebook group. But also you have is it your product, simple website edits for more cash, that workshop. Is that something that will be in the show notes as well, by the way? Is that something that you're talking about with branding as well? Or is that something completely different?
Yeah, so your website is part of your brand. And so what I tend to find is that people treat their website differently. And so that particular workshop is helping people sort of go through and help bring their DIY website up to where it does sort of fit in better with a strategic brand that they have. So, making sure that their website looks professional and that everything works the way that it's supposed to. So we can try to get some people, they just need their website to pull in that same direction as everything else, and that's just something I see a lot with a lot of the people that I talk to is they start to develop a brand and then you go to their website and you don't get that vibe at all. So it's just all about how to kind of get those two things pulling in the same direction so that we're not basically being our own worst enemy.
So with branding, now I know we've talked about colors. It all comes into play. How important would you say are fonts across all avenues? Like for instance, fonts. Is it like, I personally don't like the curly Q kind of fonts and I don't like putting them on my graphics or my website, but you don't want to have like, let me think, PT Sans, and then you have a curly Q font on your Instagram. It doesn't make sense.
No, so what I always recommend to my clients is that you not use more than 3 fonts. I prefer no more than 2, but I have a couple people that feel very strongly about that 3rd font, and I think it's okay. But your fonts are like everything else. So if you think of your brand as a puzzle, I would not call your font one of the corner pieces, right? Those key corner pieces, or even sometimes an edge piece. I think of it more as being somewhere in the middle. And if you don't kind of nail it, it's hard to see that full puzzle. But so it is important. And some things that just drive me crazy about fonts in general is just when people pick fonts that you can't read. And it's not, it just to me, when we say to somebody, we get their attention, right? And it's just such a busy world out there. And we're like, okay, I have your attention. I got your attention. I stopped the scroll either on Instagram or Facebook or any of those other marketing channels. And I finally have your time. I know from a neuromarketing perspective that I have very little time to get through your brain and the different levels and all that fun stuff. Why would I waste that time making you try to figure out what the heck I'm trying to say with some crazy font? So I always tell people, take a step back, type something out in that font, send it to a couple trusted friends that are going to tell you the truth and say, hey, can you read this? And if people are like, well, not really, you need a different font. It's okay to be, simple with the fonts, keep them easy to read. It's a time thing and it's a respect thing for your potential clients to say, I respect you enough not to make you try to squint and turn your head a certain way to see if you can read what I'm trying to communicate. What's
your favorite as far as social media outlet that you like to use for your business? Top 3.
Yeah. So I love Facebook just because I'm a millennial. And so I grew up on Facebook, it feels like. So it's just familiar. So I love it. But I think there are, depending on your market, there are some really great platforms out there. I am always a huge proponent of email marketing. I think it's one of the best things out there. And I think a lot of times we kind of poo-poo it because it's email marketing and it's been around for a while. And we like the cool kid on the block, TikTok. We're like, all right, man, we got to be on TikTok. Screw this, email thing. But I love email. And lately I've been on LinkedIn. I'm really liking LinkedIn these days too, but it really depends on the business. And, it's all about figuring out what works for you.
Yeah. LinkedIn is actually, in my opinion, almost like the Facebook of old. But it was funny because I was scrolling through there and somebody posted something and some guy, it was something controversial that you would definitely see on Facebook. And this guy, in his response in the comments put down, bro, this is LinkedIn. This isn't Facebook. So they're definitely a different vibe on each different social media platform. And I also don't believe, maybe you disagree with this, but I agree. I don't think that you want to overextend yourself to be on every single platform. Now, there are tools out there that you can share to multiple platforms that I think are fantastic. But to be able to actually engage with people, you'll be spending, unless you have a good VA, handling all that, you're going to be spending so much time, trying to do that and that's something that's not my cup of tea, to go to each different individual place and respond, unless I have a tool out there that can do it all for me in a way. But there's not really, unless you know of a tool that can actually do that. I know like there's, oh boy, I can't even think of.
There's so many tools out there and they always are coming out with new ones. But I'm actually of the same opinion as you. I think that it's really important to pick a platform that you're comfortable with and to go all in rather than sort of being like, oh, okay. Cause it's like you said, the vibe on LinkedIn is very different than the vibe on Facebook. So if you take that same post from Facebook and you put it out on LinkedIn, you're probably not going to get a whole lot of traction on LinkedIn with that same thing. And then to try to respond, it just stretches people way too thin and they're not having good interactions. And, it goes back to that human connection. We want to have connections with humans. We don't want, like, everybody knows when it's an automated post because it sounds totally bizarre. And, it gets to be too much. So I'd rather focus on putting out a good, like, say you pick LinkedIn. And so you put a good post on LinkedIn and then you respond like a human to people who engage with that. And I think that is really the way that you grow your audience and you engage with your audience and figure out what it is that they want and what they need from you. And I think that just helps you grow a better business all around.
Yeah, back in 2012, when I first started doing this, that's interesting that you say that as far as putting it on different aspects, you're going to see a different type of response. One of the biggest problems I had was actually time management back in the day, and brand new marketers or business owners, they have a hard time with time management. So if you can go about what is your, how often do you check social media? Do you have a certain part of the day that you check it, that you want to respond to people? How does that work for you?
Yeah, so it's something I am still, always sort of tweaking. It's one of those things. What I used to struggle with is I thought I had to be on there all day. And so I would always be checking social media and I would always be all about that. And what I have found is that does not work because then I don't get my client stuff done. I don't get my other stuff done. So what I like to do now is I, really think about what it is that I want to post. And I put that post out there. And I like to do that sort of in the morning. And then I just have a couple times over the course of the day where I've got it. Okay, this is when I'm going to go back on social media and I'm going to check that out. I'm going to have those conversations. I also do fun things like making sure that my notifications are turned off. I have a newsfeed eradicator on my Facebook feed so that I don't see anything unless I want to. And then I can go in and turn it off for like a half hour. And I put a time limit on it so I don't get sucked into that hole. And so just little things like that have really helped me to say, okay, at lunchtime today, I'm going to have my lunch. And before I get back into whatever it is, I'm going to take a half hour and really focus in on my social media. I'm going to have these conversations. I'm going to reply to people that have engaged. And then my half hour is up. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to move on to, what I need to do for the afternoon. And then, I set aside another half hour before I pick my daughter up from daycare. I'm like, all right, I'm going to finish the day off in a social mood. And I go on social media, be social. But I think it's important to sort of set those limits for yourself and not to try to be everywhere all the time.
Exactly. And it pushes you back so far. I'm a big proponent of turning off notifications because it will drive you crazy. So today we learned about branding, a lot of different things. And I think it's great because you guys, if you're listening to this and you're having a brand issue, I think you need to take advantage of actually going to the show notes and checking out the simple website edits for more cash. And then you actually have it to where they can work with you as well, correct?
Absolutely. I love working with different business owners. I don't specifically work with like one industry. I like working with a variety of people, and it's a lot of fun. We have a lot of fun working together usually with my clients and figuring out what the best moves for them as an individual business is.
So definitely, check out the show notes. I'll have all the information in there. Simple website edits for more cash, and then also join the free Facebook group, Strategic Marketing from Winging It to Unforgettable Messaging. We're going to definitely jump on that as well. I actually joined that, and I'm waiting for verification. So that is one thing you want to do. So now the super hyper fast Q&A round. You ready for this?
Oh, I hope I am.
So everybody says that like, oh my gosh. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to ask some questions and just answer them, and we'll go as fast as we can. If you could only eat one food for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Pasta.
Okay. What artist or band do you always recommend when someone asks you for a music recommendation?
Garth Brooks.
Garth Brooks. Okay. If you were a pro wrestler, what would your name be?
Oh God, I have no idea. I wouldn't
Come
even
on.
know.
The Ultimate Brander?
Yeah, maybe.
We'll come back to that one. We're going to come back to it because you have to answer it. I can't answer it.
All right.
Favorite episode of Seinfeld, if you have one?
Any one of the ones where they go, no soup for you. It cracks me up every time.
Okay. And then Jerry, Elaine, George, or Kramer, who would you have as a neighbor next door and why?
George. I don't know what it is. I just love him. And I think it's because he's just kind of crazy, but not in a Kramer way.
You are the first person to ever pick George. So that's awesome.
Yes.
I do. I'm a huge Seinfeld fanatic. That is, I love Seinfeld. So, and thank you for answering that. Because a lot of people say, I've never seen it before. And I'm like, and then
how can you never see it? It's like one in a million channels.
A lot of people don't watch television, and I don't watch a lot of TV, but back when I was in the car business and I was going through some rough times, Seinfeld got me through so much because I would come home, after a miserable day, watch Seinfeld, and I would completely be like refreshed because it made me laugh. And I love laughing. So,
yeah.
But that's it. Those are the only questions I have. We have to go back to the pro wrestler. What would your name be?
The Brandinator. I don't know.
The Brandinator. Okay. So good answer. Okay. So final thought. One last shout out to the Freddie O Show fam that you feel can have an impact on them today going forward.
That is a great question. Keep it real. Keep it real. If it feels like you're trying to force a round peg into a square hole, then don't do it. So make sure everything that you're doing in your marketing efforts and your branding efforts, make sure it feels like you.
Jennifer, thank you so much for being on the Freddie O Show. You are a rock star.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
You got it.